Hi, Soraya. It's really nice to see you again. It's already been 2 weeks. How crazy is that? How have you been?
Hi, Andrea. I have been doing pretty well. I went running this morning. I did a 5K.
Ooh, I love that. That's great to hear. Last time you mentioned you've had a lot of birthday dinners and social events coming up. How did those go?
They were actually really fun.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm so glad to hear that. Were you able to enjoy yourself while still managing your food choices? I know that was a concern of yours.
Yeah, I think I found a really good balance.
That is amazing. That is exactly what we're aiming for. Not perfection, but I would say more so balance and flexibility. Were there any moments where you felt maybe unsure or a little anxious about what to eat?
Yeah, a couple of times when I didn't know what was in the food.
That makes um, total sense. Those situations can definitely be tricky. So I don't want you to ever feel overwhelmed. And overall, though, it sounds like you handle these situations really well, which is a big step forward towards the right direction. Um, so, how have you been feeling physically these past couple of weeks in terms of maybe symptoms?
A lot better than before.
Perfect. I love hearing that. That's really great progress. Um, and let's kind of talk about the reintroduction phase. I know that that's new to you. You've been doing it for the past 2 weeks leading up to this session. How did that feel for you overall? Because I remember with the elimination phase, it was kind of hard. Hoping that the reintroduction phase was a little bit better. What would you say?
It was a little confusing at first, but I got used to it.
Okay. Wow. Well, again, very normal. As with anything that is a learning process. Um, and I'm always gonna ask my favorite question. Can we look at your food and symptom journal together?
Yes, let's look at it together.
Okay, so looking back, what food did you notice consistently cause symptoms?
Garlic and wheat for sure.
Okay, well, I feel like so far from the previous session, it seems like that has become very clear. And are there any other foods or situations you feel like triggered symptoms?
Sometimes food with sauces or seasoning when I ate out.
And that makes sense. Those can have hidden ingredients, kind of what we had discussed about 2 weeks ago. And what about foods that maybe you felt were safe or you saw that they didn't really cause any symptoms?
Rice, chicken, vegetables, and some fruit were fine.
Ooh, okay. Well, that's great. And tell me, were there any other foods you could tolerate? Anything else that you want to tell me about? Something I should note?
Yeah, apples and dairy were okay, but only in a small amount.
Ooh, okay. Well, that is really actually super helpful to know. So, while you didn't experience the full triggers, from those two items, maybe it seems like more a portion tolerance. What happens when you had these in larger portions?
I feel bloated and uncomfortable.
And to be expected, that is very common with IBS. So I don't want you to feel like it's out of the norm. Um, and when symptoms did occur, what did they feel like? Was it like what you had said, just the bloating, really?
Yes, mostly bloating and discomfort.
Okay. And could you tell me how often you would say you felt that happening, those symptoms, those feelings?
Not very often.
Okay, well, big improvement from when we first started, I would say. So, I love to gauge where you are using my little 1 to 10 scale. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, how well do you feel you followed your goals?
About an 8.
You always choose the highest numbers, and I love that. That's really strong. Can you tell me what helped you stay consistent?
Planning ahead.
And that is a really important skill. So, based on everything that you've shared, you've done a great job at identifying many, many, many things, including trigger foods like garlic and wheat. You also were able to identify foods you could tolerate well as foods you can tolerate in moderation. And that is exactly what we were working toward. So, now it's time to move on. So, because you've done so well with both the elimination and reintroduction phases, I'd say you're now ready for the final stage of this process. Okay, so this stage really focuses on personalization, customization, and integration.
What does that mean?
Great question. So let me kind of break down to you what this final phase means. In the best way that I can describe them to you. So personalization, it means focusing really on your specific triggers and tolerances. When I say customization, I mean in adjusting portions and food choices based on how your body responds. For example, with the apple and the dairy. Now, integration means applying this in your real life, like work, social events, and eating out. So instead of thinking, I can't eat this, you can think, how much of this can I tolerate? And that's really the goal. I never ever want you to feel limited, to feel restricted. The goal here is understanding your body, what works for you, what works for you. So how do you feel about your diet now compared to when we first started?
I feel a lot more confident.
And that is huge improvement, Soraya. So now that you've identified your triggers and tolerances, let's talk about how you'll manage this long term. So, I want to take a moment to go back to something that we talked about in our very first session. I don't know if you remember, but in our first session at that time, we created something called the Agreement for Behavior Change. So, looking back at that, you mentioned that your long-term goal was to manage your IBS symptoms and really just feel comfortable day to day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, okay. So, that's great. And you remember that you said your short-term goal was to keep a food and symptom journal every day and start following the low FODMAP diet, which is what you've been doing. You also said you wanted to focus on really avoiding your main trigger foods and really just planning your meals ahead so that it felt, manageable. And looking at where you are now, how do you feel about the progress you made toward these goals?
I feel like I have improved a lot.
And I agree. you've made really strong progress, not just with your diet, but also with understanding your body and managing your symptoms. And again, going back to that first session, at the beginning you did mention the stress and time constraints might be barriers. How do you feel like you've handled those situations, those challenges thus far?
I have done better, especially with planning.
That really, really shows. You also mentioned meal prepping in this agreement and using short meditation sessions. And you know what? To me, it sounds like those strategies have really, really, really helped you stay consistent. And at the end of that contract, we talked about non food rewards. So, the non food reward you chose was relaxing, like watching a show or going for a walk once you've accomplished some of these goals. So, have you been able to do some of those?
Yes, sometimes.
That's really great. And those small rewards can really help you reinforce your habits, give you something to look forward to, something to motivate you to continue. And if you think back to where you started compared to now, um, I'm curious, what would you say you're the most proud of?
Figuring out what food worked for me.
That is huge, and that is exactly what this process has been about. These last couple of sessions. So let's continue discussing a little bit about your lifestyle, work. So, because I understand that again, like we mentioned, really big challenge, really big barrier. So, how's work been feeling for you lately?
It's still stressful.
And do you feel like stress still affects your symptoms?
Yes.
And as you already know, as we've already established, that's very common with IBS, the mind gut connection, especially in relation to stress. And have you been able to practice any of the stress management techniques like meditation? I know that you struggled a bit with it.
A little.
Okay, it's okay. Even small efforts help. And you did really well with caffeine our last session. I just want to quickly follow up on that, which can you just tell me how are you with that? Are we still keeping it to 1 serving per day?
Yes. 1 serving per day.
Okay.
I love coffee.
I'm sure you do, and that must be really hard for you. And I'm glad you're sticking to it. And how confident do you feel about handling restaurants now? Again, another barrier aside from the work stress.
Much better.
That's great. And if you have a flare up, what would you do?
I will go back to safe foods.
Exactly. And that shows to me you can manage this independently. So, again, let's really focus on those goals. I want to get more into them. So, moving forward, your goals are focused on really just maintaining everything that you've learned. So, moving forward, I want you to really pay attention because these are things I'm asking you to do. And it looks like you've been doing a good job, so I'm not stressed in the slightest or worried. So I want you to continue to limit the trigger foods like that wheat, that garlic, and anything you feel like comes up. I want you to apply the integrated approach to your food choices, okay? And then these foods that are like apples and dairies, I want you to include them, but in a way that you can tolerate them in smaller portions. Listen to your body, okay? Maintain regular balanced meals throughout the day, which I'm not worried you've been doing it. And now I want you to use your food journal as needed. So, again, continue limiting that caffeine. I want you to practice those stress management techniques a few times per week. I promise you those will really, really help. So, how do those goals sound?
Good.
Okay, so again, with my favorite question, confidence from 1 to 10.
A 9.
That is excellent. Before we finish, because this session is coming to an end, do you feel you have any questions?
No, I feel really good.
And I'm really glad to hear that. So, since this is our final session, I'm part of the business covered through your insurance. This will be your last scheduled appointment. You've made so much progress, and you now have the tools to manage your IBS independently moving forward. Please, if anything changes or you feel like you need support in the future, you can always reach out. I'm glad to have been a part of your journey. You've done an amazing job.
Thank you.
Of course, keep up the great work, Soraya. I'll see you again sometime if you're ever willing to in the future, or maybe you can contact me whenever, okay? Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.